Alright, so today we are back and today we're testing the Radeon RX 6600 XT in Dead Island. A day or two ago I actually did a benchmark run with the RTX 3060. Now these cards are quite comparable. Depending on the game, one might be a little bit faster than the other, but I thought we could just as well test the Dead Island 2 as well. What I didn't notice is there are a little bit of traversal stutters using the Radeon card. I'm not entirely sure what it is. If you remember correctly with the 3060, there were some areas where the frame time graph would not be smooth and it would jump around, but it didn't really translate into a full stutter. Whereas with the Radeon GPU, or the 6600 XT anyway, it does seem to be a little bit more stuttery. I think I know what the issue might be. I just updated my drivers as well. It was on the 23.4.1 driver. When I started the benchmark run, I updated it now to 23.4.2. But I think Radeon anti-lag would help us here. I'm just going to run around a little bit just to get a feel for the game, and then we'll test with Radeon anti-lag and see if it makes a difference. You see that's a big spike there. We are sitting with 0.1% lows of 16 frames per second, right? With the 3060 that dropped down to around 40 or 45 or so. The average frame rate seems to be pretty much the same, but you can just look at the frame time graph there. There's just this occasional stutter every now and again, which is quite annoying. Now this is the exact same system as I tested on with the 3060. This is a 12400F with 16 gigabytes of DDR4, 3200 MHz CL16 memory. Right, so it's the exact same system. I used DDU to remove the drivers and installed the latest drivers as we speak. So I'm just going to kill the zombies. Then as soon as we get out of slow-mo, I mean that wasn't that impressive to actually activate slow-mo. But as soon as we've killed all these zombies, then I'm just going to enable anti-lag and see if that resolves the issue here for us. Because it is quite strange. This is an AMD sponsored title, and I just broke my weapon. It's the first time actually using my fists. Yeah, these zombies can be quite tough, actually. I might die, yeah? Let's see if I've got another weapon. It's very difficult to keep an eye on my health if the stupid benchmark numbers are in my way. But anyway, there we go. These zombies are dead. So I'm just going to enable Radeon anti-lag and see if that fixes the issue for us. You can actually do it in-game. Can just go to gaming here and we can just enable Radeon anti-lag, right? You don't have to apply. You can just close there and let's see if it fixes the issue, right? I think that might be it. I've seen anti-lag fix quite a few issues in the past, especially with ray tracing and The Witcher 3 next gen, and it seems to have done the trick here as well, which is quite good. Alright, so this was at 1080p on the Ultra preset, no FSR, no upscaling, and nothing whatsoever, and we had an average of 136, 135 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 75, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 17. Now the 1% lows are sitting a little bit higher than what the 3060 was sitting at. The frame rate average as well, around 8 frames per second if I can remember correctly, and the 1% lows, or the 0.1% lows, are actually a lot lower, but that was because of those stutters. Alright, but let's try the 1080p high setting. Just one thing that I need to show you, let's just get rid of that. I've just adjusted my field of view to 90 and the motion blur is turned off completely. Right, so that was at ultra. Let's try high and see what the differences are. Alright, let's just start our benchmark run again and let's just reset the numbers and start from scratch. We gained quite a few frames there, maybe 10 to 15, which is pretty okay. I mean, gaming on ultra is It's not ideal unless you have a very high-end GPU. Now, this GPU did not really struggle to game at 1080p Ultra, which is good. This is an 8 gigabyte GPU, and it only has a 128-bit memory bus, so definitely not too shabby. And in this area here, we are also getting 200 frames per second. But it seems like we might be a little bit CPU bound. We're sitting at 96% GPU usage, or we might not be, because I don't really see it going much higher than that. I actually do need a better weapon, because I think I'm not going to be making it. If you remember correctly, I lost my nice sword in the previous runs. I've actually continued playing this game, but on a different system, and for some reason the save games don't sync with Epic for this specific game, which is not so epic. But this is a pretty good experience, I must say. It's we're getting a high refresh rate experience. So if you've got a 144 Hz panel and an RX 6600 XT, then 1080p high is definitely something to consider, right? It's a good combination. I mean, it's a good experience. This, right? I think let's see if I can just get my stupid sword. Alright, the sword is actually very useful in this game. It's got quite a fast attack speed, and after a few hits, it starts to critically hit, and that does a lot of damage. Right, so I'm getting a little bit distracted here. Once again, our 0.1% lows are not that great, but I do think I broke it when I went into the menu. Right, let's just see. Yeah, exactly. Look at the frame time graph. So if you go into the menu, you just throw out the benchmark numbers. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. We got an average of 153 frames per second, which is quite a bit higher than on the RTX 3060. So there we go. All right, so I'm not going to be testing at medium, because we've already got a very high refresh rate experience here. All right, let's see what happens at 1440p. All right, we're now at 1440p, still on the Ultra preset, and I think we might be a little bit lower than the 3060, yeah, just because of that limited memory bus of 128-bit on this RX 6600 XT. On the 3060, it's 192-bit, so it just means that at higher resolutions, the narrower memory bus actually does suffer a little bit. Right, so that's where the 5700 XT actually starts beating the 6600 XT. At 1080p, they're pretty much the same, but as soon as you start increasing the resolution, the 5700 XT just nudges ahead slightly. Right, but it's still a good experience. This is at 1440p Ultra, and we're getting an average of 80 frames per second. And these stupid zombies keep on respawning, but it gives us something to do whilst we are just talking nonsense benchmarking this game. Right, I actually played this game, as I said, on a different system. I think I played around 6 hours, and I kind of enjoyed it. It's different to Dying Light, in the sense where it's not trying to take itself as seriously. A lot of the features and gameplay, etc., are the same, but this is not a full open world game. You play the game in like open stages, if that makes sense. Like you get a certain area, and you can pretty much do more or less what you want, but you are blocked off, and you have to stay in that particular area. Right, so we had an average of 82 frames per second, 1% lows of 46, and 0.1% lows are sitting at 24. Right, so I've got the 3060 numbers here, and the 3060 actually did 85 frames per second average, with 55 1% lows and 44 0.1% lows. So the 3060 did nudge ahead slightly, but definitely nothing to write home about. All right, let's see what happens on the high preset. Right, we're now on the high preset. Let's just reset our numbers there again. And we gained quite a few frames per second once again, almost seeing 100 there. And I mean, in this specific area here, just overlooking the burning Hollywood sign, we dropped down into the 70s. Now we're like in the 90s, which is pretty good. this GPU can be a little bit noisy, even though the fan speed is sitting at between 60 and 70%. It does become quite noisy. This is the XFX version, the 3 fan. I think it's the Swift 308 or something. I'll put it in the description. I'm not entirely sure. It's a very good looking GPU. This I must say, I really enjoy the look of it. Most of the XFX cards are pretty good looking. All right, so the temperatures are oops, I died. You see, now I have to restart this stupid benchmark run. I mean, we just have to reset the numbers. So, I mean, I couldn't keep an eye on my health because it's in the top left-hand corner. So that's just on me. Right, but at least the damage done to these zombies are still there. You don't have to fight every single zombie from scratch. So that helps. I mean, in my other playthrough, I fought a few bosses and I died a few times. And it's actually quite nice that you just continue. You don't have to start from scratch. Right, once again, getting sidetracked here. Getting an average of 100 frames per second here. Once again, pretty good. I thought the 3060 would nudge ahead even more slightly, but it seems that the 6600 XT is doing a pretty good job at keeping up here. The 6600 XT also draws around 30 watts less than the 3060, and mainly just to stay around 10 degrees cooler, probably because of that, and also because this is a 3-fan version, where the 3060 I've got is a 2-fan version. Right, so that was it at 1440p high. Let's see what happens at medium. Right, we're now at 1440p medium, and once again we gained quite a few frames per second, which is once again a little bit different from the 3060. We didn't gain that much by dropping the graphical settings. It's definitely not VRAM related because as you can see in the top left hand corner there, I've got 2 VRAM numbers. One is for VRAM allocation and one is for VRAM usage. Now it's not 100% perfect. These are MSI Afterburner numbers and you should just use them as estimates, but it does give you a pretty good idea, or at least some idea. All right, once again, getting into this area, let's see if we'll hit 200 frames per second. Not entirely, 170 frames per second, which is not bad at all. I think that one is dead. That one's dead. Yeah, I must say I quite enjoy this sword. I actually modified my own so that it has better force. It's got shock mod installed as well, and it just does a lot of damage with a very fast attack speed as well. All right. I'm not going to try and give away too much of the actual game. It's really a good game. If you haven't played it yet and you do like zombie games, this is definitely up there. As I said, it shares quite a lot of traits with Dying Light, but if you want something that's a little bit less sweaty, if I can put it like that, then this is the game for you. Alright, so at 1440p medium, we got an average of 128 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 98, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at a nice 69. Alright, I'm just going to push it back up to Ultra, and then we'll play around with FSR a bit. Right, we're now back on the Ultra preset, and FSR Quality is enabled. This game does not support any other form of upscaling, only FSR, so no XeSS or DLSS, unfortunately. And as you can see, the same as what we saw with the 3060 the other day, going from Ultra to high got us more or less the same frame rate increase as going from 1440p Ultra to 1440p Ultra with FSR, right? So it's pretty much the same increase as just going down to the high preset, but you do lose a little bit of image quality with the upscaling tech with FSR. I mean, it's now rendering internally at 720p, and then it's upscaling to 1080p. So it makes sense that the image quality is not as crisp as native. But I mean, this is if you absolutely have to play on Ultra, which honestly, I don't think it's necessary. High looks plenty good enough. Then you can use FSR to get an almost high refresh rate experience, right? Depending on what you call a high refresh rate. All right, so I'm just going to change the settings from here and run back the other way, because otherwise these videos will just be too long. So at 1440p Ultra with FSR Quality, we had an average of 100 frames per second, right? That's quite nice. And 1% lows are sitting at 75 and 0.1% lows are sitting at 56. Let's just drop down to the high preset and see what happens. Right, so in this specific area, we are still getting around 100 frames per second, so I don't gain that much from or by dropping down to the high preset, but I mean, we might see differences elsewhere. It's very hard to actually see the difference between ultra and high if you are running around playing the game. It is quite a fast moving game, so there's no time really for pixel peeping, but I do think that the shadows, etc., look a bit better on ultra. You can just see that it's just losing a bit of detail as you move further away. And I mean, sure, we gained around, what is it, around 10%, right? We had an average of 100 frames per second with the Ultra preset with FSR Quality. Now it's like 110, 111. But I mean, it's not exactly the same run we had, but there's not really much in it, right? And you can see that our VRAM usage is sitting at around 6 gig. So the 8 gig of the 6600 XT is definitely enough. All right, I'm just going to run back to the starting area, and then we'll start playing around with 4K. And my prediction is that now the 3060 should pull ahead slightly, but I mean, I've been wrong before in this video, so I might be completely wrong once again. But let's see what happens at 4K. Alright, we're now at 4K on the Ultra preset, and I think now the 3060 is definitely ahead. In the previous 3060 video, it had an average of 43 at the end of the run, and we are sitting with around 36. It's definitely not terrible. I mean, this GPU was definitely not made for 4K. I mean, the 8 gig VRAM buffer and the 128-bit bus are testament to that. So this is just purely for testing purposes. It's not that much slower than the 3060 at 4K, but the 3060 is also not a 4K GPU. All right, I'm just going to run back to the starting area again. Now you can see in the top left hand corner there that our VRAM allocation is sitting at around 8 gigabytes, but the VRAM usage is sitting at around 7 gigabytes. So even at 4K Ultra, 8 gigabytes is enough for this game. There are some additional stutters if you have a look at the frame time graph there, but that's definitely not VRAM related. Alright, so we had an average of 39 here, with our 1% low sitting at 25 and our 0.1% low sitting at 19. I'm just going to drop down to the high preset. Not going to spend too much time here on 4K before I enable FSR. Just going to test the high preset and then we'll move over to FSR. Right, and as we saw earlier, we gained maybe, 4 or 5 frames per second. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it might not sound as much, but it's around 10 to 12% increase just by going from ultra to high. Still not a playable experience in my mind. I wouldn't prefer to play this game at 40 frames per second. You can definitely feel the input latency a lot more. It's we're getting around 60 frames per second, yeah, and now the game feels quite smooth. But the moment it drops down to below 50, the input latency is just definitely more noticeable. I think I'm going to die again, and let's just see that as well. And yeah, I mean, it's a melee game for the first few hours, and then you do get guns eventually, and then it becomes a first-person shooter game, depending on how you play, obviously, but then the input latency will matter a lot more. But seeing what this GPU actually is, this result at 4K is definitely not a terrible one. It's not a playable one that I would recommend, but definitely commendable. Alright, let's move down to the medium preset and then we'll start playing with FSR. I lied to you earlier. Alright, so we're now at 4K on the medium preset, and I know I keep on saying that this is not a 4K GPU, but most tests are done at 4K. That's just at the previous resolutions at 1080p and 1440p. We could get a high refresh rate experience quite quickly, and I just want to just get to a point where we can actually maintain 60 frames per second at all times, right? So we can almost do it at 4K medium. You can see that it does drop below 60 frames per second every now and again. Not that often, but enough to notice it. Even if you have to lock the frame rate to 60 frames per second, you won't get a constant 60 frames per second experience, unfortunately. But we should get that at 4K with FSR. We might get that at quality, or we might just have to drop down to balanced. Pretty much the same as what we had to do for the 3060, right? So let's go ahead and test that. Right, so on the high preset and FSR quality is enabled, still at 4K. Right, I'm pretty sure we might not see 60 frames per second at all times, but it seems like it's more or less the same as at 4K medium. So I'm guessing if we drop down to balanced, we should definitely be able to maintain 60 frames per second. Right, I'm actually not even going to fight this guy. Let's just kick him just to speed things up a little bit. But I am trying to do the same run just to keep things consistent and to get the most accurate results. Well, I mean, as accurate as can be with a manual run, right? So unfortunately, getting an average of 56 frames per second. I say unfortunately because I'm aiming for 60. Still a very good experience, this, right? So let's see what happens if we drop it down to balanced. Alright, so dropping it down to balanced got us to around 60 frames per second in this area. We didn't actually gain that much from these resolution changes. Now remember, it changes the internal resolution and then it just upscales to 4K. So that's why I call them resolution changes, even though we didn't really touch the output resolution. Anyway, you can see that getting around 80 frames per second, which is good, but I'm pretty sure that there will be some areas where it drops below 60 frames per second, like right there, unfortunately. Now, it's definitely still a good experience at FSR Performance, because that actually renders still at 1080p and then upscales to 4K. Alright, so unfortunately this didn't cut it. We're not getting that constant 60 frames per second that everybody yearns for. Let's try the performance preset, and then I'm just going to drop it down to medium as well to see, because it doesn't really help you have to play on FSR Super Ultra Performance, but you're sticking to the high preset. Like, you have to make a trade-off somewhere, maybe lower the texture details, shadow quality, etc., and play on a higher FSR setting, then just keep on, then just you dropping the internal resolution consistently until the game looks like crap anyway, if any of that actually made sense. Right, so I'm going to go down to FSR Performance, which is the lowest that this game actually supports. Right, there's no ultra performance, so it's only three profiles or three presets. Alright, so we're now on the performance preset with FSR, and I'm pretty sure we should be able to maintain 60 frames per second now. So at this point, if you want to get rid of some stutters, then you can just lock your frame rate to 60 frames per second, and you would have a pretty decent experience, right? You can see that the frame rate does fluctuate. Outside it was just above 60 frames per second, and inside it goes up to around 90. So it does fluctuate, but I mean, that's definitely normal. You can't have the same frame rate everywhere in a game. But you can see here we're getting 96, 96, I'm dyslexic, 69 frames per second, which is definitely not bad for this GPU at 4K or upscaled 4K. Right, I'm just going to go back to the start one more time. I'm going to go down to 4K medium, and I'm just going to see which FSR preset nets us 60 frames per second. Alright, we're now at 4K medium preset, and I had to enable the FSR Balanced preset to get above 60 frames per second. Now it's well above 60 frames per second, especially inside. You can see we're getting 82, 83, 85 frames per second here, and this is pretty much what we had on 4K high with FSR set to performance, but I do think that it is a little bit more visually appealing playing on medium with FSR Balanced than it is on 4K high with FSR Performance, right? Because the internal resolution of FSR Performance is quite a bit lower than it is on Balanced, right? So the upscaler doesn't have to work as hard, and it's got a lot more detail to start with when it needs to reconstruct scenery or frames, right? So this is definitely where I'd play this game if I do have a 4K panel. It's pretty good for this game. This game is it's definitely pretty good looking, and as I said in the other video, it's not the best looking game out there, but I've seen a lot worse that perform a lot worse as well. I think the way they did the maps, like it's pretty closed off but somewhat open world, or open stage if you want to put it like that. So I mean, I think that definitely helps with the resource management. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. If you do play at 1080p, you can play at the ultra preset or the high preset, depending on what frame rate you're targeting. At 1440p, the best experience is actually on 1440p medium, and at 4K, you can play with the FSR Balanced preset on 4K medium. Alright, that's going to be it for this video. As I said, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.